Welcome to the Jewish Study Center. I'm Jerry Garfinkel, and I'm treasurer of the Study Center. And as such, I always tell people that our classes are free. We do have expenses, so we appreciate donations. We don't require them. We don't even say how much we suggest you give, but any donations would be appreciated. If you want to donate, and go to our website and click on donate. And then you can donate from your PayPal account or with your credit card or with a check. And if you click on pay by check, the website will tell you where to mail your check. Okay, that's my treasury stuff. In terms of some technical points, this session is being recorded. And after the session is over, I'm going to delete the stuff that started before I spoke. And I'll post the recording on YouTube and send an email to everyone who's registered on where the recording is. As you probably notice, closed captions are on. So if you can't understand one of us, you can just look at the closed captions. Everyone is muted, but we do want your comments and your questions. So please write your comments and your questions in the chat box and send them to everyone. You might put a question in, someone in the attendance will then answer you, or something with a comment. But at the end of the session, we will look at all the questions, at least those that haven't been answered already, and we'll try to deal with them then. Okay, so what I'm going to do now, I'm going to introduce Rachel Adelstein, who is ethnomusician, I think. Maybe I got it wrong. And she is writing a book about women cantors. And she is the world expert, as far as I know, at least about American women cantors. And she actually knows a lot about cantors in general. And she'll be interviewing two very prominent women cantors. So, Rachel, I'm saying you're on now.
All right. Thank you, Jerry. Thank you for having me. And thank you very, very much to Cantor Deborah Catchco-Gray and Cantor Linda Sue Sohn, who have graciously volunteered to spend the evening with me talking about their lives as cantors. As Jerry said, the word is ethnomusicologist. The first thing you learn in ethnomusicology school is how to pronounce the word ethnomusicology. And the second thing you learn is how to explain to your parents what the word means. So I'm always happy to keep saying that. So I have the immense pleasure and privilege tonight. Last week we talked in sort of an abstract fashion about women cantors as sort of a phenomenon, but here we have two actual women cantors who will be speaking with us. So as I call your name, just okay. So want to make sure that everybody's spotlighted. If we can spotlight Linda Sue as well, that way we'll be able to know who everybody is. So, okay. So as I introduce you, just sort of wave so we know who you are. Cantor Deborah Catchco-Gray. Hi there. Is a fourth generation cantor and the second cantor to serve a conservative congregation. Remember, we talked last week about how the Reform movement accepted women as cantors first and then the conservative movement. So, the first woman to serve in a conservative congregation. She is the founder and the past president of the Women Cantors Network, which I'm sure we'll be hearing more about tonight, and also the recipient of the Cantors Assembly Gregor Shelkan Mentoring and Education Award. So, Deborah. And we also have Cantor Linda Sue Sohn, who was ordained as a Chazan at Hebrew College in Massachusetts in June of 2011. She has a website, cantoreducator.com, and I think that will go out with the material with the recording. So this website combines her expertise as a software usability engineer with her work as a cantor and Jewish special educator. So already we can see that being a cantor can touch into many, many different pies here. So I am very excited to hear from both. So I would like to start actually with your story. So maybe, Deborah, if you'd like to start, can you tell us a little bit about how you became a fourth generation cantor? A little
Well,
bit
I'll
of your
try to do
story.
the very short version. I
Mhm,
grew up listening to beautiful cantorial music because my father was a cantor and my mother was his organist and pianist. And he sang the music of his father, who was a very famous cantor, Cantor Adolf Kachka. So I grew up knowing that there was a famous cantor, and then my father had this beautiful voice like a prophet, and I was just immersed in this gorgeous music. But really, when I went to college and studied with Professor Elie Wiesel, I got inspired, the idea that it's a miracle that we survived, and through my family's history, through the Holocaust. And I felt I had kind of an obligation to continue in the cantorial field because so many members of my family could not. And there was all this embarrassment of riches of cantorial music and also the sounds that I could make. And I felt that this would be a good fit, even though I didn't really know any women cantors, and certainly not in the traditional field. So that's kind of the short version,
mhm.
and I'll stop there.
Right. So
Is that question?
you then started singing in college, and
Actually, junior high,
mhm,
I started a group with Benji Ellen Schiller, who's a renowned composer and
mhm,
professor of Chazanut, and Lori Pomper, now Granat, who made Aliyah, and Dina Gelb, who I believe is somewhere in New Mexico.
mhm.
And we used to harmonize like crazy, and I got my love for that kind of thing. And then folk music and coffee houses, that was really my thing till Elie Wiesel made me believe that this is where I should go. And don't try and be Joni Mitchell, because there already is a Joni Mitchell.
Yeah. And so how did you, I remember that you told me at one point that um, you had been singing in a coffee house and that you were then invited to lead services
Yes, I
at
was at BU Hillel
Hello.
Coffee House and Rabbi Joe Pollock. Thank God. Even though I was singing like blues and Bonnie Raitt, he thought he heard a little Chazanut in there. And he said,
Mhm,
I think you could do the conservative high holiday services. Up until that point, I had only done the Friday night Kiddush in a
mhm,
conservative synagogue with my father. So as I was studying with him, I realized I had learned and kind of uh, just received all this gorgeous music. And when I led the services in Boston, it was the first time in the city of Boston a woman led a traditional service. And
mhm.
that really also opened my mind, like, wow, this is something I could do. And then
And you
from that
did.
on, I worked in synagogues every weekend, all through college.
And that's how you got your first job out of college then, was because you had that experience.
Mostly.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Excellent. Well,
thank
thank
you.
you.
Sure.
And Linda Sue, how did you come to this position? You have
Oh, I am at the other end of the spectrum from Cantor Kochko Gray.
Mhm,
I grew up knowing that I was Jewish and had a very secular Jewish upbringing.
mhm,
Very, very secular. My parents never belonged to a synagogue. And it wasn't, and they did so on purpose and made sure that I understood their version of why. Um, and then I got married to somebody who was Jewish, and several years after we got married, sadly, my husband's dad passed away.
mhm,
And my husband, who had grown up going to synagogue, but as an adult, was not practicing that much, not going to shul. But he was so impressed by what happened at my mother-in-law's flat that filled with people um, for every night of the Shiva that we came home, and he said, I'm going to say Kaddish for my dad for 11 months. And there was a shul 3 miles from our house, and we called them up, and they had regular Friday night services. And so we started going. I couldn't read Hebrew, but I liked the songs, and we went every single week for every Friday night. And 11 months came and 11 months went, and he stopped, and I kept going and kept going and kept going. And every time I learned how to do something, eventually I learned how to read Hebrew, and eventually I learned the songs to be able to, to get through different parts of the service. And then there was like, what's next? What's next? What's next? And all the time I was making my living as a software engineer. And then at some point, the college near, within an hour of my house, Hebrew College in Newton, Massachusetts, had a cantorial certificate program. They didn't have a cantorial school yet. But so the tuition wasn't very much at the time. And I said, I could take these classes and that would be fun. And maybe I could just, learn enough to get a high holiday gig and, kind of call it a day. And started and then a year after, I think, I think a year after I started going and taking classes, I got laid off. And I kind of took that as a sign that this, the shift was meant to be more permanent. And by that time, the cantorial school was starting up. And so I auditioned for the cantorial school, got in, and just kept going until I was ordained. So I was really privileged to be, most of my teachers were graduates of JTS, and some of them had taught at JTS as well. So I got a very good grounding in traditional Nusach. I'm honored to be sharing the Zoom screen with Deborah tonight, because I use a lot, and not a whole lot, but there are very specific pieces from your grandfather's publications that I use. And I use them in high holidays, I use them in Yizkor, I use them at funerals, and they're part of me now. And so, thank you, and thank I thank your grandfather for leaving that legacy of those published settings.
Thanks for being alive.
And so I just, when I was in school, I also took the opportunity to study about Jewish special needs, and got a certificate in Jewish special education. And so I've combined all of that information that I learned and created my website, cantoroeducator.com, which provides tools and materials and recordings, texts that are formatted in 4 different ways. For 4 different kinds of learners. All of my recordings are very, very slowly chanted specifically for people that are just starting out. So I've chanted the entire Torah, I've chanted all of the Haftarot, and my next big project is to record very simple davening recordings for, as many of the different kinds of services that are out there. So that seems to have been, like where I've, been called to serve the Jewish community. But my day job, which is finishing up this year, has been mostly as a B'nai Mitzvah tutor. But yeah.
All right. I mean,
Yeah.
and that's very interesting because both of you are such different kinds of cantors. We have, Debbie, you come from this very long line of cantors, and you work very much with traditional sorts of music. And I mean, Linda, you have this wonderful subfield in education. So I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit about what you perceive the role of the cantor to be. It's always an interesting question. What is a cantor? Because there's so many different kinds of cantors and so many different approaches to this position.
Want me to go first?
Yeah, sure.
Well, let me just say that I had a cousin who was a traditional cantor, and he said a cantor is a lawyer representing the Jewish people to the highest court in the land. Excuse me. And I guess I feel like a Jewish cheerleader. I feel that it was, I just retired, but I've in 44 years of pulpit work, I felt that it was my job to be literally a Jewish cheerleader for culture, for music, for literature, for art, for community, for Israel, for children, Jewish history. I didn't specifically just see it as music, but the role of the cantor traditionally is to be a shomer nuschaot, to be the guardian of nusach. And I guess
How would you understand nusach? Just for people putting up
being
the
the prayer modes that are specific for the holidays, for Shabbat, 3 festivals, high holidays. There's certain modes for certain parts of the service. And my grandfather was known for writing down every phrase a cantor needed to know for the entire year. And when he did it, it was the first time it had happened in America. And he basically codified American nusach. And he took the very florid European way and kind of cleaned it up in an American way. Now, many years later, we look at some of that, we say, well, it's almost like an antique piece that we just bring out because it's treasured and we love it. And I wish there was a little more of it. And so about 2 years ago, I started writing music using my grandfather's nusach as the jumping point. Like, people don't have the ears for a lot of traditional music unless you're in a very traditional synagogue. But most people have contemporary sounds in their head. I grew up with contemporary music. I grew up with folk music. But to start as the basis with a line or chatima or an opening phrase of nusach, and then a contemporary piece of music with meaningful English words that bring you closer to the prayer, something everybody can sing along. People want to participate. People want to sing, make it a song circle, really. That's how I began to see my role as bringing people into the world of nusach, but also having a modern interpretation and always bringing in new music. I was always a big proponent of bringing in the best new music that I could find, stuff that was singable and beautiful and also reflected the meaning of the text. One of my frustrations is hearing music that's just forced upon the text. It's just chords. It's the same chords. It could be anybody's song. It could be, Dave Matthews, Taylor Swift. He wasn't so good to Israel. But, just take any kind of chordal structure from a pop song and let's just throw the prayer into it. That's fun for Adon Olam, but it's not great for Kabbalat Shabbat or Mariv or Musaf. So that's one of my passions, is to find music that reflects the text as my grandfather did. It was called word painting. You literally try and elevate the meaning of the prayer through music.
Excellent. Thank you. And Linda Sue, so how do you see the cantor? What kind of cantor are you? How would you answer that question?
So I know for me that I'm more of a teacher cantor, that the thing that I have loved doing the most is doing B'nai Mitzvah training, or even teaching adults to chant Torah and Haftarah, or even learn how to sing, to lead prayers. And I was actually so grateful because that, how would I describe what a cantor is? And I was a little bit, I wasn't quite sure how to answer this question until I saw a colleague of mine, Cantor Matt Osterklein, who he just moved to Dallas, and I happened to go to his synagogue website that introduces him. And he actually answered this question. So I'm going to quote him because I think he encapsulates, and I very much resonated with his definition. He says, a cantor is kind of like a music minister, but in modern congregational life, it's a lot more. I lead services, teach, preach, officiate life cycle events, and offer pastoral care. I function as a full clergy person, and while I may not have a rabbi's legal training, I serve in every other way, and music is the foundation I bring to all of it. So I loved that encapsulated definition. Um, and and then for myself, I pile onto that because of my training as a software engineer, and that I kind of folded all of that into the work that I do, so that people end up coming from all over the world to my website, and from time to time they find my mistakes, which I'm very, very grateful for, so then I can fix them, and make it better for the next web visitor. Um, but I did a little bit of pulpit work where I was the cantor of the synagogue, and I've done about 7, 8 years of that on and off. But doing the pastoral work, I'm not as strong in pastoral skills as I think some of my other colleagues are. It's not what I excel at. I love the teaching. Um, I I definitely love, being with the people. I love sharing my knowledge of how to lead services, of how to chant Torah and Haftarah, and you know that's you know that's where I see my version of what a cantor is.
Thank you. I think the next couple of questions that I want to ask are about some individual projects that each of you had done. And Linda Sue, I'd like to sort of keep on going from where you left off a little bit, because you said that you had a certificate in Jewish special education and that you built your website, which is cantoreducator.com, sort of with an aim of not just addressing it to anybody who wanted to learn, but with an eye perhaps for special education. Can you talk a little bit about how you understand special education in terms of more Jewish topics?
Yeah, certainly in the United States, because Hebrew is not a native language for most people here, unless they were born in Israel and then emigrated here. Um, they so we spend a lot of time in Hebrew schools and in day schools teaching kids how to read Hebrew. The day schools spend certainly a lot more in being able to understand Hebrew. But in congregational schools, because time is limited, to an after school program that has in many cases just gone down to one or two, if many synagogues are lucky, 2 days a week for just a few hours, 4 or 5 hours a week. There's so many things to cover, and learning how to decode Hebrew, which is, one of the nice things about Hebrew, that unlike English, which spelling is a mess in English, spelling rules are a mess. Hebrew is much more predictable. There are very few exceptions in how to pronounce the words. And so one can really be able to pronounce the words even without understanding. And certainly a lot of the B'nai Mitzvah culture and engine that we, travel in helping families celebrate that life cycle of 12 or 13 years old, for an individual, that we get them to do a lot of chanting in a language that most of the time they're not really understanding every single word that they're saying. And so it's a very interesting dynamic that we've incorporated into our Jewish educational system. For individuals who have trouble reading Hebrew because of neurodivergence, and being able to do the sound symbol associations required to decode. I had some amazing teachers at Hebrew College that were inspirational for me, that were able to teach me both the nuts and bolts of trope, of the way that we chant our biblical texts, and also how to teach Hebrew in Hebrew decoding in a way that's very lasting. So I was able to take that information and combine it with my skill as a software usability engineer. A usability engineer is the software engineer that deals with what's on your screen, not necessarily what's behind the screen. Certainly they connect to the program that's behind the screen, but how things look on the screen.
So
And
the experience that the user has with the
the
website.
experience that the user has, exactly. And so for me, I was able to envision a way of providing content to people that it started out with me just making content for my own teaching practice. And the website ended up just being, at first, just a way of my putting my materials up there so that they were available to me privately, publicly, but very quickly. If I wanted to print something for a student or something like that, it was all there. And then it became a thing because it was just on the web and there are no logins, there's no ads, there's no anything. It's just there. People started finding it. My colleagues knew about it, my fellow classmates knew about it. And so it was like, dropping the pebble into the water and just watching the rings go out on their own, as more and more people found out about it. I've always contended that the website has really been a selfish project for me, for my own practice and for my own use. And if people find it useful, great. And if they don't find it useful, I'm not offended. Um, but the texts that are there are formatted in 4 different ways, for 4 different kinds of 4 different kinds of learners. I have 2 kinds of whole word texts where the Hebrew words are as you would read them in any Siddur, or Chumash. One is, but the phrases are broken up for Torah and Haftarah texts and Megillah texts. The phrases are broken into, are separated out by trope phrases, by trope families. And one version is just regular black and white text, and another version is those same texts broken into phrases, but each phrase family has a particular color. So all the siluk or sof pasuk phrases are all blue, and all the etnachtah phrases are yellow.
I've seen
Right.
texts like
And
that.
so on and so on. And so and then I did the same thing with what I call syllabified texts, where each word is broken into Hebrew syllables, and a syllable may be 1, 2, or 3 letters long, depending on the word, depending on how the word goes. But there's a little mini space. There's bigger spaces between the words and a little mini space in between each syllable. And I found, it certainly was taught, one of my mentors taught me about this process of breaking the words into syllables. And I found in my own practice that a lot of individuals that I was teaching who were just learning how to read Hebrew, I could put the same text in whole words in front of them or in syllabified form and ask them which one looks easier for you to read.
And it's going to be
And
the
more
syllables
often than
sometimes.
not, they will go to the syllabified text. And even some of my students that come in who are fairly fluent readers, I'll do the same thing, and many of them will gravitate towards the syllabified text. So I've had a little bit of empirical knowledge, empirical data, to support the reason why I do this. It's been very helpful for my students, and colleagues have also found that it's useful for them as well.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you.
yeah.
I mean, I love this sort of attention that you've paid to, passing on this practice of reading Hebrew to the next, and I think it would really help kids and adults who are coming into this. So thank you for that. Cantor Deborah, I'd love to talk about another one of your projects. This of course is the reason that you two are here, and that is the Women Cantors Network, because that's how I met both of you. And we talked a little bit last week about the Women Cantors Network, so we kind of know what it is. But I wonder if we could hear from you about the story of how you founded this wonderful way that we three came together.
Well, thank you. So, I started out in a pulpit, and it was unusual because it was a full-time conservative pulpit. And at the time, Elaine Shapiro, who had gone through JTS, was the first official. When I say official, I mean like with a contract. There were women that had jobs here and there, but this was a full-time, serious contract. And she was the only one. And then there was me, number two.
Roughly what year was this?
1981.
81.
And
Thank
it
you.
made national news. It went literally across the country. And I also began to look around my community, and I was a little bit lonely because none of the cantors, all male, were talking to me. Nobody was welcoming. Nobody was friendly. And I'm a very, open kind of person. I like to share. I think the greatest thing is sitting around and I'm going to learn from you. You'll learn from me. Isn't this great? We all get better by it. And I wasn't getting any of that. I also was a more of a humanistic education type student learner. A little bit radical education I enjoyed, and independent study, and all my studies with Wiesel about Jewish survival. I started this pulpit as a young woman, and I was like, ready to go, and there was nobody to share with. So I went to a Cantors Assembly convention because I used to go with my dad when I was younger. I thought it was fun to, hear all this music, and everybody was revering Kochko. It was kind of exciting to follow along and hear this. But I was sitting at a table with about 15 women at a meal, and I looked around, and there were women who were studying to be a cantor, women who just liked cantorial music, might be interested in it. There was Elaine, there was me. And we said, we really should get together. We should get together and share. We have a lot to offer each other. And so I said, well, I'll set up something at my synagogue in Norwalk. And at the time before the internet, I put out notices like in the Jewish Week. I think it was Moment Magazine. We just put out there's going to be a meeting, a gathering of women cantors. Anyone can come who wants to. This was in 1982. So 12 women showed up, and I'll never forget, one woman was from Brooklyn, and she said, you can put my face in a picture, but I don't want you to print it, and I don't want you to put my name out there, because if my family finds out that I'm here, I'll be disowned, because she was from a very religious family. And that was like, whoa, because I grew up thinking this is the greatest thing ever. We would just be so proud of it, But it just began that way because I got a lot of flack. Let's be honest, for about 20 years, I was not exactly welcomed into the bosom of the traditional cantorial schools, except for, I would say, JTS was not threatened. I took a class on cantillation because that was the one thing my dad couldn't teach me. And I don't think it really bothered them because there's the tradition of studying, with a mentor, and that system from Europe came over here. In fact, my grandfather was one of the founders of the School of Sacred Music with the prominent cantors of that day. But, at the time, HUC was really not happy that I did this. And the funny thing is that the head of the School of Sacred Music at the time turned out to be one of the best and most wonderful rabbinical friends and colleagues in my life, and basically saved my life as a cantor at a certain point, John Haddon. But when he first found out, about the Women Cantors Network, he kind of had to do was like the company line. You're legitimizing illegitimate cantors. This is a terrible thing. They should just go to the school. They shouldn't be, this is this is a terrible thing you're doing. And I was like, what? I just think it's great to share. I think anybody has something to learn from someone. He actually came to one of our conferences and he met Cantor Romer of blessed memory. And I remember he was so amazed and he said, my God, you have more talent in your left pinky than anyone I've ever worked with. And he was the director of the School of Sacred Music. So I always believe very strongly that there are people out there, for whatever reason, they might not have gotten a degree, but we certainly can learn from them and they've got something to offer. And we need to support each other, learn from each other. I never felt it was my business to give smicha. It's not my business to be an employment, like a union for placement. I didn't want to be responsible for saying who's good, who's not good. It's just a safe place to share. And for so many people over the years, and this is from 82 to now, it's a lot of years, it has been a lifesaver for many people who had no other avenue in order to share and gather. So it's something I'm really proud of. And I've also kind of, stepped back as the mama bear. It's time to let, the next generation kind of do what they want to do. Sometimes I feel I might have an opinion. I still feel very strongly that Cantor should be knowledgeable about Nusach, cantillation. They should be, an expert in it and not just somebody who can open up a songbook and sing from it. But I have to step back and let other people make it whatever it's going to be. I can't always be the shepherd. But my way is this new Sacred Music Reborn, Sacred Sounds Reborn project of using Nusach in contemporary music. Try and keep those sounds alive. Try and keep that going. I just want to keep those sounds in our hearts and souls.
And
Get
it
people
was absolutely wonderful to hear some of that you presented at the conference last year. And I think that you had some recordings from that project that I think Jerry will also send out.
Thank you. And I was lucky to present it at the American Conference of Cantors at the
Oh,
ACC
yeah.
and the Cantors Assembly. That was a really big moment for me in terms of, validation.
Yeah.
Getting that award was a lot of validation. And that, the early years weren't so easy, but then people began to see that, there are other ways of being a cantor. There are other ways of coming to this. All of a sudden there's the Seeker program. All of a sudden there's distance learning. All of a sudden you can learn by Zoom. All these other programs came up, Academy of Jewish Religion, adults can study part-time. All those things were not available in 1981 when I said, look, not everybody can go 5 years to a school and a year to Israel. If you have a family, if you have other obligations, let's just get together and learn.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
things
And
certainly have changed and evolved.
Yeah, and that actually is a very good segue into the next question, which I guess since Debbie started, we'll ask Linda Sue to pick it up. And that is, very clearly, the Cantor has changed quite a lot in the past 100 years since women are now, women and other minorities are now involved in it. But since you have been, I guess, conscious of the Cantor, you said you didn't grow up terrifically religious, but since you've been conscious of the Cantorate, what changes have you noticed? How has this famously malleable job changed since you've been aware of it?
Well, I think when I was in school, so I was in school from 2003 to 2011.
Mhm.
And at the time, most of the teachers who were there were, as I said, JTS trained. And so there was a lot of Nusach. We had amazing Nusach training, and at least I think so. And so the focus was there, and not so much on nigunim and songs. And there was certainly a part of the curriculum where we needed to be either proficient in piano or guitar, and in order to be able to know that part of the job, but it was definitely not a focus of the program that I was in at the time. And I think now, and I know for me, a lot of my education now comes straight out of Hadar in New York and Joey Weisenberg, and I really think that the work that he is doing, where he's neither an ordained rabbi or a cantor, and yet he is, without that, the laying on of hands of having smicha, but he is those things. He is extremely learned, and he is extremely talented musically, and he is pushing out music that is both singable in its own right and can be applied, I think, to the different nusach modes in appropriate ways. I've started doing some of that, and I enjoy it. I enjoy it. I love song circles. I love the idea of bringing people together as closely as possible, especially after COVID, when we were trying to separate ourselves so much. But Joey talks about like lighting the match and making the bonfire, and you can't do that just like any fire. If the logs are separated away from each other, the fire goes out. And if the people are sitting, Jews moved out from the cities into the synagogue, into the suburbs, and they did the same thing in the synagogue. Where do they sit? They sit in the back. They sit on this side. They sit on that side. But it's like they don't want to sit next to each other. And so I really like bringing the message about how much more fun it is when you're actually sitting next to people who are singing. And it doesn't matter if you think you can, carry a tune, or you think you can't carry a tune. It doesn't matter when you get all of those voices together, the amazing sound that comes from that and the energy that comes from that. I have seen that change, and I enjoy bringing that to the synagogue where I lead services from time to time. And yeah, I've seen it work. So that to me is a good evolution of what's happening in the synagogue in terms of prayer leadership and music. So yeah.
And it really does change the role of the cantor from like a performer to kind of a facilitator and a leader.
Yeah, and it's not even a choir director.
Yeah.
It's more of just get the music going and get everybody to come in together. So yeah.
Yeah. Debbie, do you?
I just want to say that in some ways, the trend the last few years to me is a little bit heartbreaking, because when a lot of synagogues have shrunk or condensed. Some are doing really well and have amazing cantors and very supportive music programs. A lot of smaller synagogues, when they get to hiring a second clergy, not all of them are hiring cantors. They might hire a rabbi who can play the guitar and sing some songs.
Mhm.
And I just feel like they're missing out on having a really exciting, creative music professional, a cantor, to help inspire people, not just to sing at services, but to work with children, b'nai mitzvah, etc. And that kind of bothers me, that there's some really prominent synagogues that don't have cantors. I think that's a shame.
Yeah.
I think they're really missing out. And I don't think, I'm not going to blame cantors. I think that sometimes people don't know what they're looking for, but there are a lot of, the younger cantors are not necessarily performers, but let's face it, that the way to get your foot in the door to a synagogue is to have a pleasant voice. You
Yeah.
have to be a little bit of a performer. You have to be able to communicate the music and get people inspired and uplifted. But I just hope that more synagogues will want to hire cantors and see it as something, as a valuable clergy partner in the team. Larger
Yeah.
synagogues that are flourishing and do well have amazing cantors. And I think having a strong music program is essential. And hopefully
Yeah.
synagogues will see the value in that.
Yeah. That would be great. So generally, almost all the time when I talk about women cantors, I try to keep the conversation very positive, just because I love women cantors and it's such a wonderful development in the world. But it has not always been easy peasy lemon squeezy uh, for women to become cantors. And I'm wondering if either of you would be willing or able to share instances of either, sexism or gender-based discrimination, either that you experienced or that you might have heard about. Just to give round out our view of women in the cantorate.
Well, if you don't mind, I could speak of the 1970s and 80s,
Sure.
which is
Yeah.
kind of in the early days,
Mhm.
almost, I want to say the dark ages, but the idea of a woman cantor was so new that honestly, walking into a room of men, um, you really felt like a piece of meat. You basically felt like you were a pair of breasts walking into a room. Some of the questions were so outrageous. Um, what are you going to breastfeed on the bema? They'll do anything to bring in people these days as if this was some kind of like weird gimmick. That this was just, we were like circus performers. It was pretty insulting and shocking. Um, and I had some women early on, I'll never forget, on an executive committee, the roughest on me was a woman who was just dumb. It was just jealousy. It was so silly, that maybe she had a child that wasn't succeeding. And who are you? You're 24 years old and, oh, you're a big shot. You're a cantor now and, making the national news. But I've got a kid who's struggling. So, let's take it out on you. Um, there were some sexism for sure, but I just felt I'm going to be the best that I can be. I'm going to put out a positive message. I'm going to sing. I'm going to record. Um, I did a lot of concertizing in the early years to put a good face on women cantors, and through the Women Cantors Network, we had a lot of publicity in those years. Everywhere we went, everywhere there was a convention, it made the news, and it was a positive thing. It showed that women can come together and we're sharing, and it's a safe space to talk about maternity leave, contract negotiations, vocal hormonal issues, what to wear. I mean, there are a lot of things that maybe only women would feel comfortable sharing in a small group. And it became a very powerful experience. And I think, now it's almost, I wouldn't say it's gone too far, but there are more women studying in any one year in a cantorial school. There could be, 12 women and 3 men. It's just like, whoa. So, I'd rather see it more balanced. And here's a sexist thing. Years ago, people said, oh, because the salaries are going down, there's more women who are willing to accept a lower salary. And that's the only reason there's so many women cantors. And that's not true. There are people of quality who rise to the top. Doesn't matter what you are, it's what you have to offer and what's in your heart and how you communicate with people and your passion for the cantorate. So yeah, things, thank God, have changed a lot. And after the Me Too movement, can't get away with it. People have to be more careful.
Yeah. Thank you. Linda Sue, do you have any experiences that you would like to share with us?
So I can't recall gender-based discrimination, but I can recall, certainly in cantorial school, where we had a rabbinical school in the same space. And there were many times where rabbinical students definitely made the cantorial students unwelcome in some of their classes, just even in some of the the holiday services that we would do together. Um, I never understood it. You know, they would talk about, that all we knew how to do was just sing something, and like, what did we know? And, I mean, they were getting the education that they were getting. We were getting the education that we were getting. And I didn't understand why we couldn't work together to, kind of elevate the whole thing. I mean, it takes, in any organization, if everybody knew how to do the same one thing, nothing gets done. I mean, that one thing gets done, but then nothing else gets done. And you need lots of different talents in order to make any project go.
Yeah.
And not, and no one person can do everything.
Of course.
So, so I experienced some of that, and I mostly, it was a second career for me. So I just kind of just shrugged it off. And, I had certainly, as a software engineer, as a woman software engineer, because I started in the mid 70s as that I definitely had discrimination from my male colleagues for that, but but that's a different profession. So
Yeah.
Well, I want to say that in the early 80s, I used to say, well, I don't understand why the rabbis and cantors aren't studying together more, because if they can understand each other's jobs, they'll be more collegial when they actually get out into the field. And that was seen as kind of radical back then. But of course, now they do study together. And that's so important. And I see this at conventions, and I see it in the younger cantors. They're truly colleagues. I don't see that kind of jealousy that was more prevalent years ago. And I think that's so important, that we all have something special to offer and bring to the table. And we should be working together, because we're serving the congregation, we're serving the community. And the better we work together, the better it is. I'll never forget when I worked with Rabbi Haddon. He was so wonderful. He said, Deborah, your success is my success. I want you to succeed. It makes me look good. And, I wish more rabbis. And also today, of course, there's dual degrees. A lot of cantors want to become more marketable, so they get a rabbinic degree. And some rabbis get a cantorial degree, but it's usually the cantors getting the rabbinical degree.
That's interesting.
For smaller synagogues to be able to serve them. But yeah, there's.
And my dad was looking over something that I'd written recently, and he included a little note. I don't remember who exactly it was I was talking about, but somebody who had the title Rabbi Cantor. And he wrote a little note. It said, is Rabbi Cantor an actual title? It's like, yes.
Sure.
Yes, it can be.
Absolutely.
So at the very least, I'm teaching my dad something. Yay. So we have just a few minutes left. So I do like to go out on a high note. Could each of you tell me what you think the most joyful thing about being a cantor is?
Oh.
Well, Linda, you go first.
Okay.
Sure. So for me, is because I love teaching so much, is seeing somebody take a leadership role, whether it's a student coming back to read another aliyah or another haftarah, or even an adult student who's learning how to do the same thing, or even to lead services. It is such a joy to see that skill that I gave to them, that I helped them and nurtured with them, and then they take off with it. That's, to me, the best.
Debbie?
I would say the tremendous joy of participating in life cycle events, and from birth. And there's even some comfort in funerals, where you can bring people so much comfort and strength. But working with the babies through the B'nai Mitzvah years, getting children excited about music, seeing adults cry from emotion and joy at a service, or saying that song meant so much to me, or something changed my life. seeing how your music can really move people, and being able to follow them through all their stages in life. I'm not that old, but I'm now, at the age where I could do the wedding of someone I baby named, or was at the B'nai Mitzvah, and then they asked me to do a wedding, then they asked me to do their kids' baby naming. And it's such a joy to be, it's such a privilege to be part of people's lives. And I think that is just the joy of being in this role in the community, to be part of people's highs and lows, to be able to be there for them and with them.
Well, thank you. Thank you, both of you. I have had a great joy listening to both of you, and I'm so glad that you're part of my community and that you were able to come and be with us tonight. Thank you so much for coming. I think we have, I've seen the little notes from the chat popping up. So I think it may be time to open the floor to some questions. And I'll see if I can go back through the chat and find something interesting. But if anybody has a question, I think you can like raise your E hand and we'll see it. Naomi. Naomi, if you can unmute yourself and ask a question.
Oh, okay. Hi. I just want to lower my hand. Sorry. When I do this technology, I talk to myself. I have a question for Cantor Gray. I love listening to Chazanut on YouTube, traditional, golden age. And I did come across, I guess it was your grandfather, Adolf Kachko, yeah. But I do understand before today that you are also a cantor, but I didn't know the names of your 4 family members who were also cantors. Like, I think you mentioned your father, but what was your father's name? And then there's a 4th person, right?
Yes, my great grandfather was a chazan in Poland, and he was Pinchas. He had
Okay.
3 sons. They were all cantors.
Oh wow.
Gershon, Joseph, and Adolf, or was Aaron.
And all with the same last names, right?
Kacka, Kaczka in Poland.
Oh.
My father came to America. He became Kachko, Adolf Kachko. And my father, of blessed memory, also Theodore Kachko. So it was Pinchas, Adolf, Theodore, and then me.
Okay, thank you. And I just have a few more questions. Sorry, I have a list here. I understand when somebody studies Jewish studies, they should study a Jewish language, whether it's Hebrew, Yiddish, Ladino, Judo-Arabic. There is a cantor. She's a singer and a cantor. She sings the Persian Nusach. I'm just looking for her name here. I had it. Cantor Jacqueline Raffi, R-A-F-I. She sings beautifully with the Persian Nusach, which is, for me, is, foreign because I know the Ashkenazi, the Yiddish. I'm just wondering if, you think to be a cantor, the pronunciation, the diction, knowing other languages, Jewish languages, I mean, sort of, because I went online from after last week's class and I looked up these religious Orthodox singers, Jewish singers, female singers, and I looked them up and they all sing in English. From what I saw on YouTube, I didn't hear. The only one is Ricky Rose. She's an ex Hasidic Satmar. She's not a cantor, she's a singer, but she does sing in Yiddish and Hebrew. And I'm just wondering why I looked them up, and I thought I would hear some Hebrew, some Yiddish, but it was all in English, right?
If you keep looking, you'll find.
I'll find? Okay.
I mean, I have videos out there. I've got a whole album of traditional cantorial music, 3 generations of cantorial art. There's stuff out there.
Okay. I'm just wondering about these new women. When I say new, the Orthodox, that they're singing for girls and women. I mean, I'm not saying they're cantors, obviously, they're singers,
Right.
but
Well, you know, that's,
why there's just in English? Why I don't hear more Jewish languages?
well,
that
if
are-
they're in a very Orthodox community, they might not feel comfortable singing a liturgical music, but they could certainly to women. So I don't think they're at the point where you're having an actual liturgical service by women. So
And
it might be just for entertainment at this point, or spiritual song circle type thing.
Yeah, maybe I was just disappointed. I was sort of looking forward to hearing, some
also-
Hebrew
Yeah, you could
or
also
Yiddish.
make a very good argument that English is becoming, one of the Jewish languages, given how much of the Jewish population in the world lives in English-speaking countries and speaks
Yeah.
English as a first language.
Yeah, sort of like a Yinglish, right?
Yeah.
Half Yiddish,
Yeah.
half English.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Oh, and are there any podcasts or other than today, or like regular once a month Zoom classes or Zoom sessions just about chazanut? It can be women, men, both.
Cantor's Assembly has regular programming, and the ACC might, but the CA for sure has regular song sharing, which would be, could be very interesting, and I'm sure it's open to the public. So you can look up that.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
And I think there's a fellow I met a couple months ago who's thinking about starting up a podcast like that. But
Will you let us know? Will you
Yeah.
let maybe, so yes. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.
So
People can raise their hand if you go to react on the bottom of your screen.
And I think that I see a question from Goldie Lansky in the chat. Do we see any real life implications for the imbalance in the number of women versus men within clergy classes? So I think the idea that there can be, cantorial classes that are 75 to even 100% women these days. And then Dina G kind of adds on to it. Do you think because maybe women are seeing the cantorial and rabbinical roles becoming more nurturing? So if either Debbie or Linda Sue wants to speak to that.
Well, I could say, I'll let Linda go first.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's less choral singing even in public schools. I mean, a lot of just singers in general, we've kind of commodified a good singing voice. You have to go to a special school, and or something like that, and it's just singing as a group, where I think a lot of solo singers start, which is in choral. Sometimes it's in choral music. We don't have a lot of choral music outlets anymore. We have a lot of sports. We focus on a lot of after school activities of sports, of getting better at math, of getting better at science, at all of those. And the arts, we have a lot of instrumental. Kids still learn how to do instrumental. We don't have as many town choruses as we once did, or even school choruses. And I think that the preponderance of if you're not a pop star, then you shouldn't be singing. And I think it's not as cool to sing, especially for guys, for boys, as it once was. And so I think it definitely speaks to why there aren't as many boys and men becoming singers. If you don't do it as a young person, you're not exposed to it. If all you're doing is listening to music and not making music, you're not going to develop an ear or your vocal cords, to start doing that. So.
Yes.
I just want to say that Zamir Chorale has an amazing program for high school kids.
Hazimir. You're talking about Hazimir.
Hazimir and Zamir when you're, in college. I was inspired by being in Zamir Chorale in Boston, But the Hazamir is amazing, and they have hundreds of kids singing at Carnegie Hall every year. And some of these kids want to be cantors, and it's an amazing experience. So part of the role of being a cantor is to inspire the next generation. So if you have choir, that's a safe place where kids can sing and get inspired. And hopefully we can, bring more kids in. I think there's also a practical reason why there might be more men going to rabbinical school. And I hate to say it, but sometimes the salary can be a little more impressive. And if you're the sole provider, you might look to that. And also if you have a musical background, you think, well, I can just throw in my music. There's a lot of musical rabbis. But now you can get a dual degree, and that's wonderful. You can be a rabbi and learn more about being a cantor. And cantors now have an opportunity to add the rabbinical portion. So maybe they'll feel they'll have a little more financial security, and they can offer themselves as a kolbo to a small congregation. So there are a lot of more avenues now than there were before. So I see that as a positive thing. Will the cantorial school end up having more men? I don't know, because you can be a musical rabbi, and maybe you want to be the kolbo. It really depends on what you want to do. They're amazing cantorial students that I met, both men and women, and I'm excited to see where their careers go.
I think one thing that I've sort of been tracking, my colleague Jeremiah Lockwood has
Oh, yeah,
been,
cool.
yeah, and the people that he's been studying, they're very interesting. They are largely very Orthodox men who are essentially kind of trying to use recordings from the Golden Age to bring back and essentially modernize this very traditional sound. And yet in the non-Orthodox cantorate, I'm still trying to find a good way to encompass reform and conservative and reconstructionism and humanism and all these, that it's sort of a positive way of saying it, not, well, non-Orthodox,
Yes.
but we'll call them the progressive traditions. One thing that I think is very interesting is that the progressive cantorate does seem to me to be becoming more female and gender diverse. And the Orthodox cantorate, of course, remains male and remains sort of, deeply devoted to this kind of very traditional, golden age style. So it almost seems as though there's sort of this Y branching out of two different styles of being a cantor.
But I would like to say that if you love Chazanut, if you go to like the ACC convention or the Cantors Assembly convention, will definitely show it even a little bit more. You will be so amazed at the talent of these young cantorial students who are doing traditional Chazanut in their own cool way. I heard women do traditional Chazanut. It was gorgeous. In serious concerts for the community. There's so much beautiful talent out there. When Josh Breitzer, who's the president now, I think he's of the ACC, he did a hineni, he did my grandfather's hineni as his acceptance speech. He started chanting, talking, chanting, talking. It was amazing. It was an amazing use of liturgy and chazanut and a modern presentation and conversation. There's a lot of creativity out there, and I think if you go to any of these conventions, you'll be amazed. The European Cantors Association, I just have to say, years ago, it used to be mostly men. Alex Klein, God bless him, has opened it up to women. 3 years ago, I actually did a master class there for Orthodox cantors for me to help teach them Kachko music. To be seen as a master teacher for European Orthodox cantors was pretty amazing.
Yeah.
And I can't wait to go back and work with them more, but they're very open now. They want women cantors to come. And they're mostly, in Europe especially, it's more Orthodox.
Yeah.
Their liberal reform is more like a right-wing conservative. in America. It's very interesting, but they're open to women cantors. And it's really the thing that binds us all together is the love of the music. And how do we keep this music going? How do we, reinvent it, but also protect it and bring in new music and commission new music? There's great composers out there. How do we bring them into the service and keep that creativity going? And and the whole thing is just, as my cousin Poldy, who was an Orthodox cantor, had this great teaching. And you say, how do you be a good cantor? To be a good cantor, you need to be a ner. And what is a ner? The nun stands for neshama. You have to have a soul. And the reish stands for ruach. If you have a good soul and a good spirit, you can be a light to others. You can be a ner, and then you'll be a good chazan. So I think that's kind of what it boils down to.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah. Does anybody else have any questions? I think we may be coming up. Any last questions for Debbie or for Linda Sue?
I have some questions.
Yes, Jerry.
Sure.
Given a few things, given the last thing you were saying, until, I don't know, 30, 40 years ago, there really were almost no female rabbis. There were some rabbis from 200 years ago, but, just one or two. And then the Reform started having rabbis, and the Conservative having rabbis, and now even the Orthodox have rabbis. So the question is, do you think the Orthodox will ever have women cantors? I know there's Kol Isha, which is part of the halakha, but, things can change.
I don't think that's going to change. I think the Kol Isha is pretty strong. So actually, it's very interesting that it's easier for a woman to be a rabbi because you're a teacher. But if you're a cantor, you are the representative of the congregation, and it is the prayers that supposedly go through you to God in a very traditional sense. So I don't know if people are going to be ready for that. Maybe they will one day. I don't know. But, the idea that a woman's voice can be a distraction, I think we're getting past it if you watch TV or listen to the radio, because you do hear women's voices and you don't lose your mind. So, it might happen, but, I'm okay if it doesn't. I think there's plenty of room. I mean, that's diversity. Why can't we have people believing in that kind of thing, as long as we're, kind to each other and good to each other? I don't think we all have to be the same thing.
In the 80s, I was a member of an Orthodox synagogue in Richmond. I was pretty close to the rabbi. I asked the rabbi that once, can a woman be a rabbi, an Orthodox rabbi? He said, well, actually, he probably could, but it won't happen in my lifetime. He's still alive, and we have Orthodox rabbis. So, things do change. May I make a comment, but other things you said about, new songs. Before Richmond, I was in El Paso, and the cantor there, who later became a cantor here in Washington, Ed Gerber, he always was teaching the congregation new songs, new tunes, new songs. And once everybody learned it, now it's time for a different one. Now that you know these things, we're going to change and we're going to have new things.
Oh, yeah.
So it was always new things we were learning, which was very nice. And one other comment about, you both talked about sharing. I mean, Debbie was talking about sharing kind of the network, but among other women cantors or other cantors who come, some of the women cantors and the network people are actually men, I guess. But and Linda was using her website. But we had a class a few weeks ago called the Open Sitter, where there's a website with all kinds of ritual types of things where people can contribute, borrow, take, whatever. It's open to everyone. It's a way of sharing Jewish concepts or, religious things. So there's different ways of sharing in the religious community.
I
Yeah,
think
well, I found it very interesting, the whole thing. And I'm going to send to each of you the chat
Thank
because there are things that I know you were looking at the chat, but you weren't able to really concentrate on it. But there's various things in the chat which also are asking for each of you to maybe contribute other things that we could put into the website and
Yeah.
into the email. So I'll send you all the chat.
And we have Jonathan
Their
Jonathan
voices.
Zemek, I think is going to ask a question.
Sure.
Okay, sure.
Well, certainly, he forward and promoted, what's the word? Or advocated and promoted women rabbis, but I think even maybe women cantors. I'm not sure if he in practice did that, or there are some from his circle.
I'm sorry, who?
Avi Weiss.
Oh, yes. Oh, totally. Very, very,
Good.
very supportive. Well, he was the first one supporting women rabbis, the
Right.
idea of rabbinah. I mean, I want to say that Rabbi Joe Pollack, who was very much an Orthodox rabbi and a bit of a Lubavitcher, he inspired me to be a cantor. He invited me to do the services in the conservative at BU. He said, it can't happen in the Orthodox, but why can't it happen in the conservative? And he's the one who took the risk and said, I think you should be able to do it. I think you can do it. And it was like, really? Okay. And that was, I just want to say, somebody's asking, can we hear their voices on their websites? Yes. Linda Sue is, her whole website is her chanting and doing things. And I have 10 recordings and they're on all the platforms, but I have a lot of things on my website as well. But you can go to Spotify, iTunes, and just put my name in, and a lot of things will come up, hopefully.
All right.
Okay, so I think it's probably time to close up unless somebody else would want to raise their hand either electronically or physically. I think all three of you, I learned a lot. And there is some interesting comments in the chat. Is there someone else? I see something.
I see. I just see
Leslie, are you wanting to say something or just?
I think I'm just seeing a few reactions floating up through the screen.
Okay. Anyway, so you will get a email in a day or so with the link to the recording. We won't have any more classes for the next month or so, and I have a few classes that we're working on. So sometime in October or so, we're going to have some new classes coming up, and maybe. Oh, let me mention. I mentioned last time also. I think. Our motto is come learn with us. So if you have any topics you'd like to teach or explain in the Jewish Study Center, or topics you'd like to have a class on that you can't teach, you'd like to learn, please email us at info@jewishstudycenter.org and give us your suggestions. That'd be great.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to thank all of you again, and I'm going to close up right now. Yeah.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for coming, everybody. It was wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. It's nice being together.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Okay, bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.